Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hey. Are you in the reactor meltdown phase of the end of the year yet? Okay.
Yes. You need not ask.
Are your students acting as heathens?
Yes.
As heathens would?
They do. They are, yes.
And you're starting state testing tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, fun.
Yeah, it's fine.
Anything else going on in life, the teacher this time of year you want to...
No, it's really easy. We're just phoning it in. You know? I'm fine.
You heard it here, folks. We're just phoning it in.
No learning, no nothing. Survival. I mean, this is the time of year where the kids are suddenly like, we're free. And the rest of us are like, it's April.
We're still here, though.
Like, what do you
I'm
mean?
right here.
There were so many weeks left of this, so.
Okay. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about some things that are near and dear to my heart in terms of educational philosophy. We're going to talk about Mortimer Adler, the Paideia Proposal, great books, programs. We're going to cover a bunch of pretty nerdy stuff that I have enjoyed through different parts of my life, but doing it in the context of a discussion about education as a tool for democratic practice, the strength of democracies. Highly motivating questions for me right now.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
Light work.
Light work, but I'm going to ask for your opinion as the classroom educator, how some of this might play out in terms of this guy's educational theory, because one of the chief criticisms of his work at the time was that it was just really not that reasonable to actually pull off.
To do the work.
Yeah. So we'll talk about it. Big liberal arts guy.
It's a different thing in practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that has been one of the major themes of this show over the years, is the chasm between theory and practice, or how teacher education programs prepare you for your work and your actual work.
And what those are sometimes not near each other.
Yeah. Sometimes
but the hope is.
They're quite far.
Yeah.
Before we get there, anything else that you wanted to talk about with our listeners? Anything you want to make anybody aware of? I'm good. I did want to mention, if you're a listener, go ahead and sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. That's where you can get the latest updates, episode announcements, resources, workshop offerings from Moonbeam Multimedia. That is us. And also, if there is a story in your local educational community that you think that we should cover here on the pod, we'd love to hear about it from you. Please contact us using our website or write to us at hello@16to1.com. I'll spell it out. Story time.
We're going way back. We always are. When Chelsea gets to have a shred of the choice of what we do.
Get the pen.
If it's
I
not
write the story.
Older than 200 years, we're not interested.
We're at 250 right now for today.
As I said, if it's not at least 200 years old, you're not interested.
We're going to talk about why that is today, if you can believe it.
Am I getting a copay for your therapy podcast, or what do I get for this?
Every listener of this podcast might be owed a copay. We'll check with legal about that.
Have you been?
Okay, well, here's the thing. The American experiment in democracy.
You've called it that for as long as I've known
The
you.
American experiment in democracy. Well, it's because I don't have the hubris to assume that it's fixed and immovable.
I just mean, this isn't a statement you've recently spun up.
It's true.
This is something you've believed.
It's one of my old favorites. But that experiment, the American experiment in self-governance, is 250 years old this year. Older than 200. And
the minimum has been met.
Like many of our friends and neighbors, I think it's fair to say, wouldn't you? I'm feeling not so celebratory right now.
I flat out said she's not having a birthday party this year until she starts acting right.
No birthday party.
You haven't earned
this year. I am struggling with the concept of a birthday bash for a democracy that is starting to feel more fragile and unsettled daily. So that's what's going on. And there are a lot of America 250 events going on, and I'm trying to become more locally involved. So I'm trying to go to more community events and stuff. And so
boots on the ground.
Yeah. And it's been really important and healthy for me, and I'm glad I'm doing it. But one of these things
With that.
one of these things that's happening is there is this push to celebrate.
I also think it's difficult because 250 isn't nothing.
No.
Lots of countries haven't lived this long.
I think I would be very excited under very different circumstances. I thought it was funny that America 250, there's a little logo for it. It's not very pretty, but it's
not.
It's red, white, and blue.
It looks like MS Paint swoops.
I think it looks like an AI generated logo. But regardless, there is a logo, an America 250 logo, and it's kind of everywhere right now. It even popped up on the recent telecast from the Artemis moon astronauts. I saw it. There was like a brief moment where we got some rah rah America logo placement in the feed, but they set a record distance. They went farther away from Earth than any human has ever traveled, which is
I'm
just
jealous of.
Yeah, it's an incredible achievement, and even during all of that, I was feeling just like, dang, what a weird time to try to be excited about this crowning human achievements in the sciences against a complicated backdrop.
But also, how unfair to get to be so far.
You're jealous.
That's what I meant.
You're jealous of
my
the
jealousy
distance.
is that
I see.
You were on the dark side of the moon and I wasn't.
Okay. Well, I am trying hard not to be grumpy in this cognitive dissonance. This
I
moon,
will temper.
The moon stuff. It's like Star Trek coming to life, and it feels like we might be on the brink of turning away from that kind of to the stars, exploratory and curious and innovative American dream. So anyway, that's all happening, and I started to think that I'm probably not the only one in my friend group or town or whatever it might be who's feeling a little bit adrift in the cultural moment.
For sure.
Or like looking for some kind of rootedness with what feels like a lot of political upheaval going on, and like, you know, craving community and these other things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I started thinking what kind of America 250 event or gathering or something would suit me or people like me. What is something I can do to mark this passing of time and what feels like a significant milestone, even with everything that's going on? And I was like, maybe there's an opportunity for like a frank discussion on where we are and how we got here. Perhaps even more urgently, a conversation about where we want to go. Working through in real time this idea that if we're going to celebrate the American democratic experiment, we ought to be on the same page about what it is that we're celebrating.
Yeah.
And I landed on
that kind of the thing of America, though? Is that we all get to celebrate
different aspects of the thing, of a multifaceted togetherness. Yeah. I mean,
I'm looking for the upside.
That's
you're reminding me of hope.
The upside.
So I'm trying to remember that is something America has celebrated.
I appreciate that.
No problem. I've got 0 more, so I hope that was enough for you.
That was your one big positive thing for the day.
Okay, so I'll talk to you guys in 20 minutes.
Okay, bye. So I ran this idea by you, and I'm going out on a limb by putting something into the atmosphere before I've had a chance to fully bake the idea.
You won't regret this at all.
I won't at all. I landed on this idea of a community seminar series, something probably on the roots of American democracy. Maybe like work with a local library, or
we should read Hamilton's essays.
Yes, the Federalist Papers.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Tocqueville, Democracy in America.
There's a play about Hamilton. Have you?
A musical, perchance? Oh, we could read, like, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, Supreme Court cases.
Yes. I like that. I will say. The one, I have had a Hamilton line in my head for about a year now.
What's
and it's
that?
the line that it's like, America, you beautiful unfinished symphony. And I think about that a lot. That is hope. And that there is a symphony to write. And that it will be worth listening to.
Yeah.
And I'm choosing to see that as hope because
I'm trying to combat the doomerism of it's all been a wash. Like there's no.
Yeah, like I'm being pessimistic, but I do have in me the hope of the unfinished symphony is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Is that it does strike me as important. So you're not sure what we'd be reading. You're just toying around with the possibility of.
Yeah, texts that were and are important to our national identity and that reveals something about the motivations behind the project of American democracy And something that gets us asking questions about whether the original aims and goals are still the aims and goals we ought to be having now, or whether we need new ones, whether we need to hit the brakes and take stock of things and just figure out collectively where we want to go next. And as soon as I started thinking about this idea, I started having doubts about it being a good idea. A lot of my friends, our friends, your friends, are teachers and history nerds and lovers of language and things like that. There are plenty of people in our town, in our county, who have interests that span far and wide, but perhaps do not generally include reading opaque snippets of prose from dead philosophers and statesmen and things like this, and, you know, talking about it for hours with no particular purpose in mind. So then I just was like, why did I come up with this? Why do I think this particular way? Why am I reaching for a community-driven seminar? And
so now for our next topic of therapy.
Why is it that I think that a seminar on democracy is the best way to address the evolving malaise of American national identity? And there is, in fact, a reason for that. It has a lot to do with, in my case, my undergraduate study traces its way back to this guy named Mortimer Adler. And that's who we're going to talk about today. His projects, his ways of thinking about the American educational system, how it fits into the idea of political reform, all of this stuff. Adler and this guy named Robert Maynard Hutchins, who's also kind of a big educational reformer at the time, they were worked together at the University of Chicago, and they tried to do something there, which was abolish the elective program, like the undergraduate. They tried to overhaul the undergraduate program there to get rid of electives. And they actually ended up going through with some of these reforms that Adler tried while he was there, but they ended up tossing them out after he left. Fast forward, and Mortimer Adler ends up trying again at another college on the East Coast called St. John's College. And that's where I went to school. So anyway, we're going to talk about Mortimer Adler a little bit, his holistic liberal arts approach, his obsession with great books. The main thing that he is most focused on is this idea that education has to happen in a certain way in order for democracy to function well.
Mortimer.
Yes.
What do his buddies call him?
Morty? Mo?
Okay.
Ooh.
He is a prolific philosopher. He's an educational theorist, and he's a reformer. He was a psychology professor and instructor in the City University of New York's People's Institute, which is a civic and social organization that was originally focused on helping recent immigrants to the United States become full participants in America's democratic systems.
Yeah.
He also served as the Encyclopedia Britannica's board of directors.
I thought you might like that little
I do love
tidbit.
that.
You love an encyclopedia.
That's one of my favorite sources.
Okay.
So, Adler rejected the idea of philosophy as an academic silo, and he instead believed that it was everybody's business.
Everyman, philosopher.
I like the energy. So he was actually a high school dropout who turned into an intellectual cornerstone, or maybe thorn in the side of the University of Chicago, probably depending on whose side you're looking at it from.
Yeah, can I interrupt you to tell his dropout story real quick? He was a star student. He was the editor of the student newspaper in high school. Something happened. I couldn't find details of what exactly, but something happened where there was a dispute with the principal of his high school, and the principal removed him from being the editor of the school newspaper, and then he left. He was like, bye.
Oh, I've seen enough.
Also, at Columbia, he got his undergraduate degree. That's where he was teaching psychology. It was a 4-year program he did in 3 years, but he would not take the swimming test, so he did not ever
Why was there a swimming test?
It just was part of... It was part of Columbia's.
Not my swimming test for my sociology or my
it was like the
philosophy degree.
Yeah. It was like a physical fitness element that was required at the time. And he's like,
No,
I'm not doing that.
I will not be swimming.
He didn't get his degree until like 60 years later.
I love that he's like publishing like, get a liberal arts education. And then one part of the liberal arts that is viewed as very valuable. He's like, not this one.
Physical development.
Like body and mind. Yeah. Like that's like a big part of the liberal arts approach. And he's like, nah.
Physical fitness? Who needs that? I'm just a brain with legs. Okay.
Well, this is a great segue because his goal was to make the great books accessible to the public. And so he actually published a piece called How to Read a Book, The Art of Getting a Liberal Education. His hope was not only to never swim, but also to... Sorry, Mortimer.
His only goal was not to swim.
His only goal was to float. His book and pieces like it would help people get the tools that he found valuable and necessary for them to participate in dialogues that are important to healthy, sustainable democracies.
Yes.
He wanted people to be more than just a vote. And so that was his work. His work was devoted to, might I say, more well-rounded people in some ways.
He called it the hollow ritual of voting.
Yeah.
Which it does feel as though we are currently in a span where democratic participation has, for many people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, been reduced down to this, I show up, I cast vote, that's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. He's very much oriented around a much more participatory democracy.
And I think today that probably feels even more true just because of, like, people now seem to be voting on one line or the other. There isn't a lot of the gray area, which he would support.
Very polarized.
With learning, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so in his 1982 Paideia Proposal, Adler argued that a society divided into an intellectual elite and a working class is a democracy in name only. He viewed equal educational opportunity as a hollow promise if it meant merely providing different tracks for different learners. And instead, he believed in a single, rigorous liberal arts curriculum for everybody, regardless of your ability, your background, your interest. And this is the quote: "The best education for the best is the best education for all." I'm sorry, I will not forget he would not swim. This is falling on deaf ears currently. It just feels very like, yeah, you, not me.
I hear that. You know what this sounded like to me? This sounded almost exactly like the conversation that the Committee of 10 had. They did the same thing where they were like, no tracking. You remember that?
Yeah.
So this is in a totally different time period because when was that? 100? Early 1900s? Really early 1900s. Fast forward almost 80 years and we're doing something very similar. And Adler is responding to what he thinks of at the time as a degradation of... the American schooling system with respect to the question of, are we preparing people to be good citizens?
Why did he name it this? What is the Paideia? Or what is a Paideia?
What is it?
Is it a
Paideia
singular event?
Is the...
I'm not sure if it's singular or plural.
Okay. He's very into the Greek intellectual tradition and Aristotle specifically. Aristotle has this concept in the Politics. He talks a lot about education as a process that is adapted to a nation's form of constitution. So for Aristotle, education and governance are kind of inseparable. Okay. And that's sort of what Paideia is. That's education for functioning citizenship.
Okay.
He's really interested in this like different values system where education is not oriented around vocational training or even vocational goals. It's oriented around political existence and political goals and cooperative democratic undertakings. So
some Dewey influence.
Oh, very much.
Probably.
Very much. I think this is him trying to bring some of Dewey's principles
back around
into, democracy and education. So yeah, like you were saying, this book, he publishes it in 1982, just 1 year before A Nation at Risk, which is a document that we've talked about a lot, but it is the Reagan admin's Department of Education report about the sorry state of things in the
That's a good way to
in
put
the
it.
American education system. And it galvanized a lot of education reform, and a lot of stuff happened because of that report, for better or for worse. So this proposal coming just 1 year before that, it was largely rejected, as I would say even many of his proposals and reforms were kind of thought of as being a bit fantastical and out of reach at the time.
Which isn't a stretch to say.
No, yeah.
I'm of like two minds of it because I don't know. Sometimes I feel like people talk about changing education in such a way that it's like, well, yes, in my dream world, that would also be the case.
It's too abstract.
Yeah, or it's just like you're skipping the meat of what we have to do to get there, and nobody ever has the blueprint for it. They have like the end goal.
A blueprint of change, you mean? That's the hard part.
The steps too. Yeah, whatever that might be.
Scaffolding from point A to point B.
Throw in a scaffold. We love. Listen to you.
Yeah.
As I'm trying to get all of the educational words to fall out of my head for summer, you're like, let me throw in scaffolding. This will be good.
The thing that I think is interesting about that is that the people who were most miffed or unenthused about Adler's proposals were probably many of the very people that he had in his sights. Like, these are the people who are screwing up the education system. These are the people who are making it undemocratic. And his proposals were very disruptive to a certain way of teaching and learning that was perhaps more in vogue at the time. He's very especially setting himself up against vocationalism.
Interesting.
And yeah, he's trying to address rapid technological change, which sounds quite similar to where we might be right now. His focus was the K-12 school system in America, but he's also pretty invested in adult and voluntary and lifelong learning. I want to talk with you about some of the principles that made up this proposal. I think some of which you'll be like, yeah, this makes sense, and others of which you might be like,
wouldn't be on my list.
Yeah. These have gotten distilled over time. The Paideia Proposal evolved into a working group, Paideia Group, and it became the National Paideia Center, I think. It's still around. People are still doing this work and providing trainings in these methods and things like that. But here are some of the enduring principles that fell out of that, and tell me how these sound to you. The first is that all children can learn and deserve educational quality, the quality of education that is received by the students in the best educational systems, whatever that is.
Yes.
Every student can learn, every student deserves quality, not just quantity of education. Okay, you're fine with that one.
Next.
Okay.
I'm thinking about public students.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think you'll like this one too. Schools should be judged on how well they prepare students for lifetime learning. So like the process of learning itself, not any one subject matter or like job training or anything like that.
I like that.
You're about to start state testing. Instead of being evaluated on your student scores on state testing, you're now evaluated on how well you prepare them to be learners for the rest of their lives.
To do whatever is. Yeah, I like that.
This is one of those ones where my brain immediately starts getting to work on how would you measure that.
I'm not thinking about those things. I'm just...
Well, this is right, but this is like where his proposals have run into issues.
Yeah, I guess if I'm...
How do you measure?
I was approaching this with a different frame of thought, which was on the premise that it could happen. Would I agree with it?
Oh, it's a totally laudable goal, but I'm just... This is where I want to hear from you as the classroom educator with experience. Yeah. If this sounds appealing to you, how would you want to be evaluated on your effectiveness in reaching this goal?
It would probably be closer to like standards-based grading than anything else, if I had to guess of what that would look like. But then I assume that the standards would change as well if that's what you're moving towards. So
there's something about evaluating students here, and he thought that students should be evaluated according to their own performance and competencies and not primarily as compared to other students. Basically like ranking systems, any system where we're judging one student in relation to another student.
I don't know about that one. I do agree that it should not be primarily as compared to others. I think I agree with that part of the phrase. But I don't think eliminating a reference to peers completely is useful.
Well, what if those measures still exist, but they're just not, you're still going to, like if you administer a test, you're still going to know how many students are in the top 10 percentile or 20th or whatever it is. You're going to know where your students fall, but those are not the measures that your school system or you as a teacher are evaluated by.
Interesting.
Hypothetically.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about the attendance issues that we're facing, absolutely. Because that's part of that evaluation.
Oh, this is interesting. Truancy is a big issue for you right now, is that?
Oh, it's huge. It's one of the biggest issues I've dealt with this year.
This year?
I think it's...
Probably after COVID, I would imagine.
I think that is true. I also think that I'm teaching some different groups of students this year, and so I'm seeing it in ways that I haven't always. And so I'd be curious if I was teaching a different group of them this year, what that would, you know what I mean, reveal. A lot of my time is attendance tracking and things like that. It's probably the biggest hurdle I'm facing this year.
This is where he gets a little pie in the sky, because I think that reality that you're talking about is so very disconnected from what he's even talking about.
I agree with you. It is accurate that for some students, the core expectation is what gets them there. I would love to know what he would say to those people. Like, would he say then the education isn't whatever enough and we're not making them want to be here? Like, is that, like, I don't know. I'm just...
What is the reason for any student to want to show up and just do things that are not aligned with them fully realizing themselves?
But can it also be true that they don't know why yet, but that it will become apparent, and that still makes it valuable? I think that's the hiccup for me. I am constantly fighting the battle of, when am I going to need to know this?
Yeah. Well, like, let's get into...
Do you know how good it is to just know a lot of things that you don't always need? Does that make sense? Like, I value the learning.
He has some thoughts to say about kind of the purpose of things.
I don't think I like Mortimer.
You're waffling. You're going back and forth.
I'm waffling.
Well,
I am waffle.
Let's talk about what he thinks education and schooling is for. Okay. Helping students earn a decent living, be good citizens, and make good lives for themselves.
Okay. I do want to have good citizens. Mm-hmm. I want to have a strong community. I think that's what I'm hearing in this. It might not be the words I would choose, but I'm hearing those things.
He also thinks that education happens primarily in the minds of learners, which means that you, as a teacher, are there to help when necessary, but you otherwise might want to get out of the way. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's true?
I think I trip over myself a lot, so yeah.
Interesting.
I do think, I don't say that every day, every period, but I do think there are times where I'm like doing too much.
You're doing too much.
Yeah, and I mean, how many times on this podcast have I been like, gosh, I spent all of this time on this great lesson and they hated it, and then I threw something together in 3 minutes on my car drive and they loved it. That's exactly what we're talking about. The willingness,
But I want to bring up a point that you just mentioned, which is sometimes they're not going to love the thing, but the thing is really important
worth knowing
to them to know, even if they don't know why it's so important for them.
Yeah, I agree.
So you, I think, are always doing this weird dance where you're on the knife's edge between
that's true.
Stuff you know is important to convey and then like finding a way
trying
to convey
make it
that makes them not want to be truant.
And that's very difficult for me, it appears. My student data suggests.
Oh.
There's a question for Mortimer. We'll have him as our guest on the next episode.
Is Mortimer Adler's ghost?
Yeah.
He has things to say about how you ought to be teaching. Are you ready for this one?
Okay.
He thinks pedagogy rests on 3 pillars. Didactic instruction, lectures, which I know you prepare. Standing and some delivering.
I do some yapping.
Coaching, which is more about your interacting with students and noticing like skills and study habits, regulating attention and focus and time management, those kinds of things. And then the bulk of things happens in the Socratic seminar discussion.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? He thinks the seminar itself is an engine of democracy.
I don't know if I would say it should be the main mode. I think they should all be 33 probably is more closely to what I would say.
Oh, like with lecturing
and
coaching.
I would say it's probably an even split between the 3.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, maybe it's because of who I teach, too. I'm sure that there's some... maybe the psychology of this episode is off because of my current clientele.
No, I mean, I think it's relevant because his whole thing is that, like, we shouldn't track. But you are explaining why that has based challenges in implementation.
Yeah.
Right.
For me this year, I would say it's more evenly split between the 3. For my current students, coaching is a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably because I have so many seniors this year. And I think seniors need a lot of coaching. They're going through all kinds of things.
Transitions.
Questions, decisions, things
life
like that.
Changes.
Yeah, so I've definitely felt like a coach a lot this year.
Okay.
But I don't think I would say I feel like a coach as frequently for my sophomores. With them, I feel more probably sage on a stage at times. I will say my seniors are better at what would look like a Socratic seminar than my sophomores. So I think that there's some maturity that comes into that as well.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I'm probably not equal with him on those, but I think it's because I'm looking at 2 very different groups of students.
I do sometimes wonder if Adler's philosophies are a little more influenced by some of his adult education work.
Yeah.
A lot of this sounds very nice, but also a little bit disconnected from mass media, digital, social media, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like the information era's impact on especially like teenage minds.
I think you're right about today's student, too.
What do we need now that we didn't need then?
Patience. No, we need patience then, too. I think media literacy is probably the biggest thing. I am aware that there were certainly media literacy issues in the 80s. Don't get me wrong.
It's become a more urgent,
much more. Yeah.
Yes, I think that the information capture that we've experienced, the channels of news and information, the way those are managed now requires
totally
what you're talking about.
Yeah. But I really do think that had you asked me these questions last year, I'd have different answers. And I think
Stuff
that's probably
is evolving
the point.
very quickly.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. I do wonder if Adler would have spent time in a 712 or 812 or 912 high school. How would that have shifted or evolved some of this? Because the difference of a freshman to a sophomore is incredible. And then when I look at what my sophomores compared to what my seniors, it's just worlds apart. So I think that's why I'm having a hard time like blanketing these like...
No, I hear you. There's something about his philosophy, even as appealing as it is to me. This is like what I did.
This is your bit.
It can definitely feel impersonal. The man's a prolific writer and theorist and philosopher, but he seems sometimes to be disconnected from actual, real human individual students.
I think that's something I felt quite a few times when we talk about predominantly these men who have opinions on education.
Yeah, you had very little patience for the Committee of 10 for similar reasons.
Those are different issues, but I do have some, well, no, not totally different, but I think this is what I would say. I like a lot of this on paper. I really do. I would be curious to see how he would evolve this. This like didactic instruction coaching and Socratic seminar might work in whatever groups, but like give you a group of 25 freshmen fresh off the block. You're going to have to quickly adjust.
I believe that he would say that this takes time to develop and a skilled seminar leader.
And that's not easy.
No.
I can tell you that something that my seniors struggle with, and this is for the last essay of the last English class. A student today said, I want to write about this topic. And I said, okay, it's a persuasive, argumentative essay. What are you going to persuade me of? And they said, I have no idea, but I know I want to write about this topic. And I was like, okay, well, do you agree? Do you disagree? You know what I mean? Like, so I even have seniors who I would consider to be strong students, educationally willing, you know what I mean? All of these things. And they're still trying to find their voice. And so...
Do you think this presupposes too much that they already have voices?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I spend too much of my time telling them, this is what we're talking about, and this is what I'm thinking about, and I'm trying to encourage them to think too. Mm-hmm. They haven't been given the freedom to evolve these thoughts, the freedom to think these things.
Yeah.
And you have to be thinking for this to all work. And our kids aren't always thinking in a few ways. And I ask all the time, what makes you say that? Or how did you get there? Or things like that. Because they don't realize what they're doing in their heads to say what comes out. And so I'm like, no, tell me that. Because that's the interesting part.
Expose your own thinking. We'll move on to some of the main points of like critique and opposition here. But before we get there, I just want to say these last couple of things.
Yeah.
He also thought that building leaders, principals, or college presidents, or whoever is in charge, they shouldn't just be bureaucrats. They ought to be like leading teachers.
Yes.
Whose main job is the stewardship and cultivation of an educational community.
Yes. Period. Every administrator I know misses kids.
And then the other one is that the educational community ought to be continuously engaged in learning and self-development. So it's like a lifelong thing, basically. It's like the expectation if you're a teacher, you're going to be doing learning for the rest of your life as well as teaching.
What's the other side of this? Like, I mostly agree with this fellow, I think. I would have some questions, but I'm mostly with him. But what was he facing?
I mean,
if you just don't believe in like a liberal arts education, then certainly that would be somebody who does not.
Yes, there are definitely people who objected strenuously to the whole thought at all that the sort of great books backed liberal arts approach that he had was a good idea. But a lot of the objection he ended up dealing with in the early days of trying some of this stuff was from within the people who the group of people who supported it, because they could not agree on what great books to teach. They're like, there are too many, and I think these ones are important. Everybody's little
so
pet
many
projects.
Dead white men. How will we pick?
And then
Shakespeare is so good. How many slots does he get?
That's another point of critique here, the Eurocentrism of his canon. Maybe not so many other perspectives presented. If you read from this Western canon great books tradition, you start to have ideas about goodness, like what is good. It can change your whole perspective. And this is part of critiques of Adler, is that he's kind of like an intellectual elite with respect to these projects that he thinks are sort of the corner of the market on Western democratic thinking.
I actually, I have had students tell me that I feel on a pedestal at times because of my reading and my approach.
Because you're
and things
interested
like
and
that.
curious in things. See, this is where I struggle, because there is a definite anti-intellectualism in American public life right now.
But I have heard that about me as an English teacher.
That's interesting.
Oh, of course you say that. You teach this or you read this or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, I do have to read. It's like part of my title. But
Yeah,
like
that's the knee
it
jerk.
creates a hurdle from students sometimes.
Right.
And I wish that
Because you're starting from the disadvantage of having to talk people into the idea that it's worth doing in the first place.
right. And I'm like, reading
Learning.
is good.
Reading is good, actually.
We should all read more. But I can't say it quite like that because then I'm just like, you know.
So then the last thing is like the impracticality of it, and this is what we
Which is
talked
kind
about
of what
before.
I was talking to you about. Like, what would he say about my class load? What would he say about Appalachia? You know what I mean? Like all of those things. Would that reflect somehow in his beliefs?
And also the difficulty of training Socratic leaders, which is really very hard to do.
yes.
And I think he would be the first to admit that this would be very difficult to actually pull off. I think he sees it as a radical transformation.
yes.
And would be willing to admit that it would take an extraordinary expenditure of resources and realignment of values to get us from point A to point B.
yeah.
So he'd be like, yeah, this is a big deal, actually.
Yeah. There's some part of this that's just like right day, right time. Willing learning, right? Like you cannot force it. And so you have to have all of the right things in all of the right places, everybody in the right mood for it to happen. It's very complicated. And I know this is like really corny, but it is truly like catching lightning in a bottle. Like that's what it feels like when it goes well. Those are just the things that I'm thinking through. Like when you're talking about the impracticality of it, I don't mean to say that it could never, but it is part of the like, how do you get there? What is this support and training? Like what we were talking about earlier. We have these great ideas for education. What's the blueprint for that?
I think he would have to. I think he would say though that part of what you're asking for is like more certainty than, well, not you specifically, but what the education system is asking for is more certainty than this approach can provide.
Yeah, I think you're right.
If we were to really do this, we have to become immediately comfortable with discomfort, with that factor that you're talking about, with the fact that this is not a predictable method of instruction because you're bringing people into it, and all of the baggage that every student has is coming into a discussion now. That's why training people in Socratic methodologies is so hard, is because it's so unpredictable.
And one of my leader teachers, when I first got my job, was great at running Socratic seminars. They're very difficult for me to grade. I have a very hard time grading a Socratic seminar participant. And that is a hang up for me personally. So I would have to become more uncomfortable in it. And I don't like that.
Is it because you feel like you can't as easily check boxes and show your work with respect to the grade that you issued?
I mean, I'm fine with that not being easy. It's very hard to explain to kids the difference in level of knowledge or something in a response. Kids have a hard time seeing themselves in others or vice versa, or seeing distance from others. They would immediately be like, well, so-and-so got this on it, but they only talked twice and I talked 3 times. But how do you explain to them the content, the depth of knowledge, the whatever else that goes into it would just be unprogramming them from all of the rubrics, the learning and grading that they have become accustomed to then somehow value the learning of someone else.
What you just described, that whole process, seems to me like it would be so valuable to actually do.
It is. No, it is. And
yes, it would be a lot of unlearning, but that is precisely the unlearning that we want.
Those are the things, though, that have become programmed into them. And so these are the same struggles I have when I have a in-class discussion where I grade.
Let me just ask you, now that we've had this discussion, do you think this seminar series, Roots of American Democracy seminar series, do you think it's a good idea? given everything that we just talked about?
Yeah. Yeah, of course I do. I definitely think so.
Okay.
Gosh, I'll do anything for people to read
Well,
and
okay.
think.
Well, let's push on it a little bit and
Please.
say, like, what do you think, and you were sort of getting at this a little bit, what do you think the sort of rules or norms of a learning environment would have to be in place for that kind of educational experiment to be successful?
With community people, right? Not like in my classroom. You're talking
I
about,
guess
like,
I'm talking more generally.
Okay.
Just in general, if you're taking this approach and you're taking these methodologies to heart and sort of putting a seminar-style discussion thing at the heart of whatever it is you're doing, what do you think are the rules for structuring that kind of conversation?
I don't know how this would be a rule, but, like, basically listening with a willingness to forgive. They might not have said it right the first time, but we give them the chance to get it right.
So like a different kind of listening, a more attentive kind of
a very patient.
Listening with patience.
Yeah. I don't think it should be viewed as like a spar or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that...
It's not competitive, it's cooperative.
No. And I think it would be hard because I think that there would be some fact in what you're reading, right? Like there are truths of a text. But I think sometimes they can get in the way. And I think that that would be hard to let go of and hard to adhere to.
Being like a factual know-it-all.
Yeah, like that would be difficult.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to let the text breathe a little, and I think that that would be something that I would worry about.
I'm on board with you. I jotted down that people ought to refer only to the text that's being discussed and try to avoid bringing in outside knowledge that other people at the table might not have. So basically like, oh, I read an article on the internet the other day that said blah, blah, blah. Those kinds of things can be useful, but maybe not for a discussion with this
I agree
kind
with
of purpose.
that. It's like the half-truths. It's the danger of a half-truth is what I fear
Or
here.
missing context.
Yeah.
I also said we should leave phones far away from this. And if you notice that you've been talking more than others, consider giving space for quieter participants to join the conversation.
And that's a hard thing to do. Nobody wants anybody to feel awkward. So you fill up the space because you're uncomfortable in the silence.
Let me ask this one, because this really gets at the heart of some of what I think might make you a little uncomfortable. And that's that Adler is really strongly and transparently against vocationalism. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with him that this structure of like tracking creates this two-tiered system, an anti-democratic system, but a two-tiered system where there are some people who have the skills and knowledge to do governance and other people who do not have the skills and knowledge to do governance? Is that a concern?
I definitely fear it because I'm seeing it. I see it more and more every year. Right now, what schools are dealing with are the promise of a tech or vocational opportunity that guarantees this much money at this many years. And I think in some ways that's seen as success because you go be your cog and you get paid and the machine goes. And for some people, maybe that's the bottom line of, are they making a good life, or, you know, what were his statements were,
good
earn
living,
a decently living and make good lives for themselves. Maybe they would see those as fulfilled. I don't know that you would automatically assume to be a good citizen in that situation, but...
Well, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you're asking any of the questions of what makes good citizenship.
Right,
in that scenario.
but I'm just trying to say if we're applying it to his, then they might say I'm 2/3 of the way there and I'm working on the third, and that's not a bad place to be.
Interesting.
But that's a difficult place for me as someone who values learning to be like, yes, but what if? And especially as someone who I felt like I knew of like 12 careers growing up. And that's what it felt like, you know? Like there were like dream careers.
Veterinarian,
and astronaut. And then like
there were like
the realistic ones, which was like social worker because my mom was one, teacher because my dad was one, and then like my aunt was in insurance, so like I knew that was an option. And then I knew that there were like factory jobs because like my grandpa and dad had those and I wasn't interested in that. And so I think today, especially, to go become the thing you are sure you want to be without any other learning of what you could be is difficult, because now I'm looking around like, nobody said I could do that. What do you mean that was an option? I would have, you know. And I also want to be clear that I don't think currently, financially, it is wise to just go get a degree to have a degree for the sake of the degree. I don't think college is a one-size-fits-all. So I totally understand why there are plenty of students who are saying, so you're saying I can go do this and this and this for the next 2 years and then I'll make this. I get it. But that doesn't build in any time for them to become who they're meant to be. That doesn't give them any time to become something else, because then it's seen as a lost investment or a sunk investment. So those are the moral challenges of what we're facing in this economy, literally.
Yeah. Do you think that this proposal, this system, could be effective at all if there's not a critical mass of participation in it?
No.
Because
the end.
We don't have a critical mass of participation. The people doing this seem like crazy weirdos. I personally attest to this.
I don't have a critical mass of any of my classes willing to do English work, so yeah.
I put a note in here at the very end that says they put Socrates to death is all I'm saying.
They did. And it's because he asked too many damn questions.
Here's a parting thought. Adler was very explicit that this was supposed to be foundational work, meaning that it's the beginning of something that has to continue for the rest of your life. And I personally think there's a lot of it that doesn't even make sense to do in the first place unless you also commit to being a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I agree.
There is no point in going through these motions or reading these books or having these discussions if you do not intend to continue learning and unlearning everything for the whole rest of your life.
Yep.
And that's a big ask.
It is a big ask, and it's very difficult to be constantly sifting through what you know and what you don't know.
It's sort of like this thing that Dewey thought was important about looking to the greatest parts of history that are not mired in your present moment. You're trying to have some kind of like clarity of historical backward looking. Now you can see it in context. That was the important part of focusing on books that are a bit older.
Yeah.
And I get that, but I also fear that without elements that reconnect that learning back to the present challenges of democracy, that you're setting people up for failure. Let's talk about what we learned the last couple of weeks. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, mine is hot off the press.
Okay, the hottest.
I will include this link in the show notes, but the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was acquired by a nonprofit, so now it's going to continue, which is great news, because originally they were planning to be closing in May. So this nonprofit media group that also is in charge of the Baltimore Banner is now
they bought the Baltimore Banner.
Is now going to be heading up the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which is very exciting because we love to see news live.
I've been a big fan of the Baltimore Banner's work since they've been under this nonprofit. Well, I've just been following it because it used to be, my local newspaper.
Yeah.
It was a big deal when that happened for that, and they've done a lot of really good reporting, and I'm looking forward to...
Yeah, and I hope the same thing for the Post-Gazette. I think it's great, and I'm glad that we aren't losing news. I think that's more important than anything.
Yeah, I think there are going to be probably some unfortunate restructuring consequences of it. I was reading about what they were saying about it, and they're like, yeah, it's a kind of a long and difficult process, but it's worth that investment.
What you got? Well, what horrible news do you have? What technology is taking us over? What
no horrible news, nothing.
Shall we do?
Nothing bad. I'm just now finishing up the last pages of Robert Putnam's The Upswing. It's kind of relevant to this Mortimer Adler conversation, actually. It's about, he keeps calling it this inverted U curve. It's like a century's worth of American civic and social growth and then following decline that happened over the last 100-ish years or so. He talks a lot about associational life, so like clubs and service organizations and business groups, churches, democratic and labor organizing, stuff like that. He looks at all of these trends, talks about how social and democratic flourishing happens or doesn't, and maybe how we can renew some of our efforts along those lines. Yeah.
We will see you in 2 weeks.
Talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Bye-bye.
Hello, listeners, and thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of 16 to 1. This show is produced by a two-woman team, your co-hosts Katie Day, our lead researcher and social media manager, and Chelsea Adams, that's me. I edit and produce the show, and I also make the music you hear in our episodes. Visit our website at 16to1.com for show notes and resources, or to get in touch with us. 16 to 1 is sponsored by Moonbeam Multimedia, a firm that partners with civic innovators, educators, and mission-driven organizations to help create stronger communities.
If you've been personally victimized by Chelsea on this podcast, please.
Yeah, don't call
Sign
me.
up for our newsletter.
Don't email me.
Don't email, she said.